Hello everyone, my name is Ziamaro and welcome to Battlerite Sage. So today I want to talk about something that I think a lot of people are wondering right now. I have been accused in the past of being a little bit biased, particularly because I tend to paint both the game and Stunlock in a positive light. I've said it a few times before, but the whole reason I started this channel was to help new players and to keep the game growing. I really like the game, so I want to see it succeed, and for that reason I do try to keep things as positive as possible. If people come to the Battlerite subreddit or look at what content creators are saying and all they see is dead game memes, it's bound to drive players away. So I prefer not to add fuel to the fire, but when you're creating content for a game, it's also important to mirror the community sentiment. So here we go. Is Battlerite dying? Last time I spoke about the state of the game, the player base was actually in a pretty good place. The peak numbers hit 16k, which was the highest in January, so naturally I took that as a good sign and said, no, the game isn't dying. But when the peak numbers have fallen below 8k in the last week, it's a little bit worrying. Admittedly, the weekend looked a little bit better, but when the population is literally cut in half in 1 month, it's obviously a little bit concerning. I've said it before, but doomsaying is unhelpful. However, there is a big difference between trolls going on Reddit and saying dead game for a cheap laugh, and people voicing genuine concerns for the future of the game. There are a hell of a lot of people right now who are genuinely concerned whether or not the game will take a 180 and begin to grow again. And I'd be kidding myself if I said I wasn't a little bit concerned myself. So, is the game dying? Who knows? The player base is certainly shrinking considerably. It will eventually hit a saddle point where the game stops shrinking, but how far will it go before that happens? And how much will it grow after that point? Honestly, that depends a lot on why the player base is shrinking, so let's speculate on why the numbers are falling. The main reasons for the numbers falling according to the community are the following: a lack of depth, no feeling of progression, bad matchmaking, a super long preseason, and a lack of marketing. So, opinion time. Which of these are actually contributing and which are not? Let's start with character progression and depth. Personally, and I'll reiterate, this is my opinion, I think it's a waste of Stunlock's time to invest in creating more map modes with objectives. Yes, there are people who would enjoy BLC's Conquest mode and stuff like that. I know I would play it from time to time, but the main draw to this game is arena combat. The core of Bloodline Champion's player base were originally drawn to it because you could download the game, unlock a champion, and instantly you would be on an even playing field with someone who's been playing the game for months. A few months after the launch of BLC, they introduced a medallion and trait system, presumably to entice the League of Legends players to the game. It was kind of a progression system of sorts. You leveled up your account, you unlocked new traits, medallions and gems, and you would become slightly more powerful as you played the game for longer, and it allowed you to build your character in different sorts of ways. But long story short, the whole thing was a complete disaster. League of Legends players continued to play League of Legends, and people who loved BLC for what it was just quit in droves. And I guarantee the same thing would happen to Battlerite. The people who've already left because the game lacks depth and progression won't come back. And those of us who love the game for what it is will probably quit too. But let's look at the wider definition of progression. People don't always mean character progression, of course. I think a lot of people want a greater sense of personal improvement. They want some kind of feedback to tell them that they're getting better at the game. It's quite difficult to show people how they've progressed, but an in-game leaderboard and percentiles would be a great start. There's a good chance that the lack of these features has made people feel less motivated to play and driven them to play other games instead. And for higher tier players, the fact that the Grand Champion list is growing and growing is pretty demotivating too. Something that seems like it should be exclusive to the very top players is increasingly becoming filled with more and more players who don't seem to belong there. Luckily, that is confirmed to be sorted in the future, but even so, competitive players are driven by, well, competition. So if you've got to fight for your position in GC, that's going to motivate you to keep playing. So what about matchmaking? This is kind of an interesting one because there are matchmaking issues, but it's not the hard stuck in silver problem that some people seem to think it is. As far as solo queue is concerned, the main issue is for very high ranked players. They do consistently get bad games in solo queue. But for us scrubs in lower ranks, our games are usually quite well matched with the odd outlier. It's not too bad for the most part. However, the biggest matchmaking problem is in team queue. Getting your rank in 2s and 3s is super wonky. If you get 3 Grand Champions from solo queue and make a 3v3 team, you could throw all of your placement games and you'd still get placed in High Diamond or Champion. Likewise, you could have 2 high-ranked players and a Smurf win all of your placement games and get placed way below where you belong. I know from personal experience that coming up against top players and a Smurf and losing a boatload of rating because they're supposedly a low-ranked team is very demoralizing. Personally, I want to get to the point where I can beat top players consistently, so it doesn't bother me too much, but it still shouldn't happen and it will drive people away from the game. So next we have the long preseason. This kind of loops back to the competitive aspect of Battlerite. If you're someone who just wants to improve at the game, it shouldn't really matter what season we're in. But let's face it, most of us who really love this game are competitive people, and as such, it's important that our competitive mindset is satiated. And being stuck in a long preseason that you could perceive to mean nothing is kind of meh. It might feel like you're climbing for nothing. And a lot of people will, understandably, just drop the game until the first quote-unquote real season starts. So finally, let's take a look at marketing. Marketing is obviously one of the main things that will bring new players to the game. As regular players with no inside knowledge, we obviously have no idea what SLS's marketing strategy is. We know that they pumped a lot of money into getting big streamers and YouTubers playing after the free-to-play launch, but unfortunately, as I've mentioned in my previous points, we've been missing some important features. So the huge gains that the game saw at launch have quickly dropped off again. I just hope that they have enough cash left over to do another big promotion once the first proper season starts in March. If, whenever we get the in-game tournament system I keep banging on about, there's just no buzz around it, it will be such a waste of potential. Clearly, I have no idea what SLS have lined up marketing-wise, but I really hope they can get people back to the game once all these issues are sorted out. There's not an awful lot to talk about right now apart from the monthly champion releases, which usually get a decent marketing buzz around them, to be fair. So I'm not too worried that marketing has died down a little bit for now, but I sincerely hope it will ramp up again in the future. So, what will it take to make the game grow again? Maybe the lack of depth and progression have driven some people away, but I don't think those people would have played the game long term anyway. So investing development time into character progression and objective-based maps is a compromise that I think will satisfy no one. People who love the game for what it is want in-game tournaments, the ability to spectate friends matches, and other competitive-oriented features. People who want character depth and objectives have already quit to go back to WoW, League of Legends, and Dota, and that's fine, but they're probably not coming back anyway. So I'd rather see development time dedicated to improving what the game is all about, competitive gameplay. If I wanted Battlerite with item upgrades and talents, I would go play WoW Arena, and actually I probably will play WoW Arena in the next expansion, so it's not like I don't like character progression. I just want Battlerite to be the best at what it actually is. Pure, unadulterated arena combat. Regarding personal improvement, I think the game needs to offer a better sense of self-improvement. Even PUBG, which is nowhere near as competition-oriented as Battlerite, has pretty decent stats and leaderboards. And if the stats and leaderboards reset between seasons, you could look back at your stats in the previous season and see how much you improved. I would say that's a pretty good sense of progression, right? I guess it would be a start at least. What about matchmaking? How can we sort that? Team Q is a bit of a shitty experience sometimes. When you keep coming up against top players with one Smurf, it's kind of frustrating. Smurfing is a huge issue in Team Q, like a really big problem. People shouldn't exploit it, but you know, people like to pub stomp, so we really need in-game systems that prevent it. It's a hard one to solve, but more placement games and better detection of Smurf accounts would be a great start. People can still throw placement games, but it would at least make some difference. Unfortunately, I think a lot of the issues with solo queue will be solved with a larger player base. So while matchmaking should always be tweaked for the best experience, it's kind of a catch-22 situation. For the solo queue experience to be better, we need a larger player base, but to build a larger player base, we need consistent matchmaking. I don't know, how do you solve that? The preseason has been confirmed to be coming to an end in March, so that shouldn't be a problem for much longer, so let's just keep our fingers crossed that it'll all be worth it. And finally, marketing. The game needs another big injection of marketing and advertising. Let's just hope SLS have enough cash set aside to do that. Once we have leaderboards, proper seasons, improved matchmaking, tournaments, and spectator mode, I think the game will look a lot more appealing. But if all those features are just lost in the noise that is the modern gaming industry, it will be a crying shame for all the players who love this game so much. So, should we all just keep the faith? Well, I can't speak for anyone else, but I like this game enough to continue playing it even if the player base continues to diminish. The player base is still large enough for my liking at least. I just sincerely hope the game will grow again. Anyone who is still playing the game or commenting on Reddit or YouTube videos clearly shares that sentiment as well. So all we can really do for now is just keep enjoying the game and keep pumping, I guess.